Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. As always, we ask you to leave comments, like us, and subscribe. All of that helps to keep us on the air. So today's guest is pretty fascinating. He's somebody who's a bit of an explorer. His name is Richard Riccardi, and he's the author of The Wandering Worshipper. And in that book, he shares his year-long journey visiting 33 different places of worship across denominations and faith traditions. He also has a blog called 52 Steps Forward. And his early business, he led his family's food business for a while, but he's also an attorney and a CPA. And as a former business owner, he brings a grounded, open-minded perspective to questions of belonging, presence, and community. His work focuses on how faith communities shape human connection and why simply showing up can transform how people experience differences, inclusion, and meaning. And audience, I'm glad that you showed up. So at this point, I'm going to ask Richard to tell us about his spiritual journey from childhood until now, and then we'll jump into his book. Richard, the mic's all yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bob, and I appreciate that very generous introduction and really delighted here to talk about a spiritual journey. Because my book, and we'll get into it, is about visiting all these churches and what I experienced. But obviously, church is not faith, not necessarily faith. It's a faith practice. And so what's going on is much larger than that. And let me tell you how we got to this point. I got to be the wandering worshiper. Is that I grew up like many kids. My mom, I was a cradle Catholic. My mom made sure I got all the sacraments, the religious milestones that are in the Catholic Church. And so I attended church very regularly, and I learned a lot about the Catholic faith and following all the rules and regulations. But what I didn't get is enough about really how that touched my soul and how that touched my spirit. And too often focused on the rules and regulations and adherence to those as evidence of faith. And they really weren't. And what happened is it kind of left me a little bit empty inside. Now, right here at the outset, I better say I'm not a critic of the Catholic faith. It is a beautiful, well grounded faith. And perhaps if I had learned it more and engaged myself in it more, then I would have come to the point where I needed to. Because obviously, there are a lot of very faithful Catholic people who are way beyond rules and regulations. But we're talking about my spiritual journey, and that's where I was. So I went out of a sense of obligation. My kids came along, so I went out of a sense of obligation. And then, just like the parents of difficult marriages, well, we're going to stay together for the kids. And then once the kids move out, they got divorced. And that once my kids got a little bit older, finished the sacraments, I kind of drifted off. But I knew that faith was important, and I had a belief in God, something greater than myself. And at some point, I joined a group, a collection of friends. We got together and formed what I would call a loosely named faith group. Most of the time, we're talking about cycling, our lives, our difficulties, our challenges, our triumphs. And we included some study and some prayer in it. And that kind of kept me going. And then ultimately, without making the answer too long for you, is that I decided at some point I was going to put church to the test. My mom told me it was always something good to go to. And so I said, well, I'm going to put it to the test. And in order to do that, I said, okay, I'll have to think of some way to do it that will maintain my interest so that every week isn't the same song or dance, or I would get bored and quit. So that's when I decided I'm going to go to as many churches of every different size, shape, faith, color, size, and everything in 1 year and see what it meant. And I caught the bug. and we'll talk about that more. I caught the bug, and now I'm a very faithful church attender, incredibly faithful church attender, no matter where I am in the world. But more importantly, that the community that I found in these churches has helped propel my spiritual journey. So I got into church for community, and the community accelerated my faith development. And so that's kind of, and
Yeah.
I would say today I am more invested in my faith than ever. I practice it more than ever. I try to learn more about it than ever. But in no sense of arrogance whatsoever, I sometimes find myself being very spiritually immature and realizing it is a process and not a destination. And it doesn't discourage me. I say, well, I've got more to learn. This is great. I've not reached it. I don't know it all.
Yeah.
Just like everything else in my life, I've discovered that I don't know it all.
Okay, so the first question that comes to mind is, all right, at the end of all this, where did you end up? What church did you end up with in terms of your basic home church, I guess I would call it.
Sure. And so I want to emphasize I went to churches of all different faiths. I was a cradle Catholic, but I went to the Baha'i, I went to the Jewish temple, I went to the mosque, I went to a variety of places. Now, I was a cradle Catholic. My mom was not excited about my journey. In fact, she said, well, this is fine. But remember, your soul is stained with the mark of Catholicism. Like, no guilt or
Oh,
anything.
wow. Okay.
Do whatever you want, but just remember that. Um, but there's of course, an ironic end to that story. So I was traveling all over the place, and look, I realized I of course went to Catholic churches, and I went to non-denominational Christian churches also. And I always liked the Catholic Church because I thought, well, that's a very serious religion. And the non denominationals, well, they're just freelancers doing whatever they want, and they're not rigid enough for me. But as I went, I saw a different practice of faith. I saw a much more emotional practice of faith. I don't know if I want to say necessarily deeper, but more engaging practice of faith.
Mhm.
And so then I started being drawn to the non denominational church. But beyond that, something interesting happened. I said every size, shape, and color. Well, I started going to churches that had congregations that don't look like me. For instance, I went to three churches. I'm not going to call them black churches. I'm going to call them Christian churches with black congregations. And it's very intentional that I've changed that nomenclature, not to take away from the tradition of black churches, of course. I'm not trying to destroy that culture or relegate that culture. But what I found there, where I was most different, I was most welcome. Obviously, when I walked in there, they knew I was not one of them, but I was engaged and embraced like I couldn't imagine. In fact, one of the churches I went to, I joke around, I was hugged and kissed more times than at an Italian family reunion. At one church I went into, and I met the pastor beforehand, talked with some people. It was time for services to begin. I took a seat by myself on a row, and I was alone. Well, a young man who I had met before church came up and sat next to me and said, "Hey, you're in our church. I don't want you to sit alone by yourself."
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, there was a third church I went to that I felt very engaged with, and the congregation entirely engaged me. And for whatever reason, seemed to ignore that I wasn't the same color as them.
Mhm.
And ultimately, I wound up joining that church, and I became the first white member at my church that had, before I joined, solely a black congregation. And I will tell you that race was never an issue. And so I don't want to brag or estimate it, but I like to say they're related to me on either a very high level or a very fundamental level with no arrogance, but just as a child of God that, hey, you're a child of God. We're all children of God. And so the color doesn't make any difference. And it
Mhm.
hasn't now. 5 years into it, I'm a deacon at the church and just, fully embraced, and it just doesn't come up, and there's been now some other of my tribe who've crawled underneath the fence and also joined, uh, since I joined. But I just found a welcoming atmosphere that transcended race.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a story, related in some small way. My cousin, uh, grew up singing in a number of different churches because his parents, uh, his grandmother, who's also my grandmother, uh, was fully engaged in church music. So wherever there was a church that would pay them to come sing, they would come sing. So often they were with the church for 3 or 4 years, as choir members. My grandmother's the music director. Uh, so what he grew up feeling about church wasn't a connection to Jesus or to God. It was a connection to the music and the beauty of that. So fast forward to to when he's in his late 60s, early 70s, and uh, he's he's got a choir of his own, and he gets his choir to sing with a gospel choir. So there's his choir, which is lily white, and they sing with this all black gospel choir, and they're doing programs together. So in one of these programs, uh, they're singing a gospel song, and suddenly everybody turns around and looks straight at him, and he can't figure out what's going on. He's not the main singer. There's a soloist there who's singing, but everyone's looking at him. And then he realizes that he's about a foot and a half off the ground, and everyone's staring at him because he is levitated. And they
Oh my
just
God.
feel this miracle has happened to this person who's singing with us. So from that moment on, he said, I found Jesus. He said, Jesus has been my Lord and Savior. And uh, he that was the moment that he found what we'd say is religion or a way to worship God. So he had been doing church stuff all his life, but it was from that moment on, late in life, that he experienced a miracle.
Wow, that's remarkable. And I've come to my faith or my faith development, in a different way. And some people have that literally come to Jesus moment
Yeah.
like that. They're struck by lightning, and gee, I've come to God. Me, I would say it's been a slow evolution. I think it is for many people that your spiritual maturity goes in fits and spurts, and it's been probably the last 5 years that mine has accelerated, and I'd say that the church journey and finding a home church has helped accelerate that. But it's also changed my notion about um, what faith is. And so, what I've learned in more recent years, or what I've come to believe in more recent years, is that the essence of faith for me is accepting God's love. And when I do that, it transforms me into lovers of all.
Yeah.
And so that's how um, you know, I look at it today is that if I can really accept God's love, and it's not as easy as you think, because there's feelings of unworthiness on our part, feelings of disbelief. Can God really love us? Does God really love us in this world and the things that happen in this world? And then, am I worthy to accept it? But once you can work on that, and it's an evolution. I don't know if it happens in one day, or for some people it might. It certainly didn't for me. It transforms you into lovers of all. And that's when there's a peace in your life. That's when there's a joy in your life that is unsurpassed. And I will tell you that I still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
In fact, in my spiritual journey, I would say I love God and remain in God's and always aspire to be in God's will, because it always turns out the best result for me. I always feel the best, and it's always the best result. Well, that's
Mhm.
fine. Many people would tell me, I do it because I love God. I remain in God's will because I love God. So I'm not mature enough yet. I'm working on it. And maybe next year, if you have me back on, I might be able to say, okay, I got it. I drank the Kool-Aid. Now I love God. And this is why I'm doing it. So look, I think that's all to say is that we come to different understandings in our lives, and there's a spiritual maturity, there's a journey, it's a path. Hey, think about, eh, well, first of all, I'm going to come back and say, and this is not unusual. I'm not going to criticize myself. Read A Tale of Two Cities when you're in high school by Charles Dickens, and then read it
Mhm.
when you're 35 years old, and you get a different understanding.
Yeah, sure. Uh-huh.
And so I continue to have a different understanding about my faith and my journey.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm okay with that. And I continue to work at it to move forward. And that's my encouragement, to people in this regard. And I think and the reason why I'm happy to be here today, well, one of the reasons among many is that you, a lot of people have been turned off by church in some way. And then unfortunately, the second thing that comes along with that, they equate church with religion or faith or spirituality. And so then because of an injury related to church, it hurts their spiritual journey.
Mhm.
And so what I'm trying to encourage people to do is explore church and that there's a place for everyone and everyone needs a place. And when you find your place, it's going to help you on that spiritual journey.
Yeah.
So going to church every week doesn't mean necessarily you're faithful. It doesn't necessarily mean you're very spiritual, but it's an environment that would allow it. Now, and there's so many bad stories. Let me tell you a couple of good stories. So one of the things is we hear a lot of bad things that happen in church, but I want to tell you how powerful church can be. I told you I joined a church where I was the sole white member. And I'll let you know that a few months after I joined, during Black History Month, I sent my pastor some writings that I had done about from my travels to Charleston. And it was about slavery, racism, and plantation homes. Something motivated me to send it to my pastor. My pastor calls me up and says, hey, you know what? This is great. Why don't it's Black History Month. This Sunday, you get up on the stage with me and you're going to talk about these subjects to our congregation. Now, of course, I was a little bit nervous about doing this, given, wait, I'm the middle aged white guy talking to my Black congregation about Black subjects, right? I will tell you, I was well received with open arms, and I was able to say words that were uplifting, truthful and uplifting to everyone. And I don't know where else that could have occurred but in a church.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
The, the congregation would have that type of openness, that a group of people would have that type of openness. And I was trying to share my observations and perspectives, but I wasn't trying, I didn't have any political viewpoint,
Right.
with this.
Right.
And so and that's surprising. You wouldn't expect that ordinarily, but the church environment, I think that faith component allowed a receptivity that maybe wouldn't be experienced elsewhere.
Yeah. I'm going to veer little bit away from your book for a minute,
Yeah.
just because I'm curious about a couple things that I read about you. Uh, since you started in the family food business, what what was the family food business, or what is it, and does it still
Okay.
exist?
Not in its current form. So my family business is we made frozen entrees for grocery stores, and we made them all under someone else's label. So it might be a store label like Safeway or Kroger, or it might be what we would call co-packing for a brand like Saffron Road or Annie's or Zatarain, something like that. So you would have never heard of our company name, but we might have made the food that you saw in the grocery store and picked that up. I sold that business. It was my family's business. We sold that business 10 years ago.
Okay.
And so it was a great opportunity for me. Beforehand, I was a lawyer and CPA, but then joined the family business, and it was a great business for us, and had wonderful experiences there. And then since that time, that's led me to now I help ambitious early stage entrepreneurs with investment counseling. I've started trade, let's say, organization for CPG companies here in the Dallas Fort Worth area. But then I gravitated towards this writing, this newfound love that I have of writing, and that led to the blog 52 Steps Forward for those who prefer to think rather than be told. And then ultimately, that helped build the writing muscle that led to the Wandering Worshiper.
Okay. Now, this shirt that you're wearing, where it says the Wandering Worshiper, is that a shirt you wear every time you go into a different church? Because you still explore different churches. I've read that in your book and what you do, and you travel quite a bit still, right?
I love traveling, and so church is not something I just do in my neighborhood. It's wherever I go, wherever I travel, I plan ahead of time. Hey, where is there going to be a church close by that I can go to, or even not close by? So 2 weeks ago, I was in Lima, Peru, and guess what? I go find a church, and in this case, I could find English speaking services in Lima, Peru. I went to go to the church. Now, I didn't pack the shirt with me, so no, I didn't wear the shirt.
Oh,
But when
okay.
I'm in the US, if I can carry the shirt with me and pack it, yes, I'll pack it and show up at that church and talk with people about the experience. So yes, the past 3 years, have gone 51 out of 52 times, and I'll jump through hoops in order to make it happen. Now, obviously, that doesn't prove I'm the most faithful guy in the world. It does prove that I'm very committed to church, and I love seeing other experiences that in other places. And so I might into a church in Annecy, France, and they're so excited to have some Yanks. I took some friends with me. We were on a friends trip, and it was a combination coffee bar, Zumba studio, and regular bar. That's what it was during the week. On Sundays, it was a church. Walk in there, so we had coffee beforehand, no beer afterwards, but, and the congregation was just so happy to have us. They're giving us restaurant recommendations, shopping recommendations, so every place I go, I get some great interaction. I was in Chattanooga. I have grandchildren in Chattanooga, and I've gotten a Chattanooga home church now that I go see every time I go up there. Now, this is funny, it just happened. In the book, I talk about coffee, donuts, and how I started bringing bananas to my church, so we're healthier eaters. The pastors in Chattanooga read the book. I was in Chattanooga a month ago. I walk in there, and on the snack bar, they've got bananas. So, I'm hoping my book brings all these souls back into church and everything, and maybe all I've accomplished so far is getting bananas in one snack bar, I joke around. I guess that's okay. That's my start so far. That for sure is something I've accomplished.
Yeah, it's always difficult to ignore the donuts at church, and, my
Well,
wife and I
I've
try.
actually done a good job. I've done a good job in injecting bananas and mandarins. And I look at my church, we have them every week. If I'm out of town, I leave someone else money to go buy them to bring them to
Yeah.
church. We got it 52 weeks a year.
Okay, so in your exploration of these initial 33 churches, uh, what would you say was your biggest surprise? If you can if you can call it a surprise or something that you said, "Oh, I never would have thought that in this situation."
Well, I encountered a lot of that. I would say my biggest surprise is, and many people anticipated this for me. Weren't you scared walking into these places where, number one, you don't belong, even if it's your church, you don't belong, you're not a member there. Or number two, it's places that you're obviously not a member and different face. Weren't you afraid and scared? And so maybe it's just my open-minded and open-hearted personality, but I didn't really have a lot of anxiety. And it was justified not having a lot of anxiety. I will tell you, most places have little welcome committees or some welcome desk that
Mhm.
they're prepared to welcome visitors into. They want you to feel comfortable when you're with them. And it's not in any sort of cultish way that this is a cult and they're trying to draw you in. They're just people, hey, we're genuinely happy that you came to join us this time. You're a fresh face. We're happy to see you. Um, and I found that universal at virtually every single place I was welcomed. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I will tell you I was a little bit. And if you talk to the general public about when I tell people my book, they were surprised at how welcome I was, especially, where it was obvious I didn't belong. And then I think what you have to really consider is when you go in someplace with an open heart and open mind, and you open yourself up to an interaction, you'd be surprised at how some of the walls and your preconceived notions just drop on down. So I go to the mosque. And fortunately, I had some friends take me to the mosque because I would have been a little bit fish out of water,
Yeah.
not knowing where to go exactly and so forth. So they were at least able to guide me. Hey, this is the room we got to be in. Sit or kneel here, and so forth. And afterwards, this guy comes up to me, and it took me a second because it was out of context. It was the doorman from my mom's condo building.
Ah,
Uh, and what happened? And we were always friendly. Hey, it's hot outside. Hi, how you doing today? But him seeing me in his mosque, that's communicated something to him about my openness and my receptivity to different things. And I will tell you that marked a change in our relationship so that when I went over on a Sunday to go see my
mm,
mom, then it would be, oh, gee, you know, th oh, let's talk about his immigration. Let's talk about his food from back in Morocco. Or, hey, I just bought a house. I just bought my first house and I'm so excited about it. Or something about my kids. And it led to just a different relationship. Now, we didn't convert. He's not
yeah.
Christian. I'm not Muslim. But it just allowed us to have a more intimate relationship. Um, I love to tell you a story about a time I was in Chicago, and so there was my Uber driver was a young, Muslim man, and, he had an interesting first name, and it had something to do with screwing up his immigration paperwork.
Oh,
That's really what his name was. It was a screw up on his immigration paperwork. That meant no first name.
uh,
And I thought, and then he told me about it. Then, he told me he's Muslim, and I said, and he was from Pakistan. I said, oh, I've got friends from Pakistan, and actually, my assistant lives in Pakistan. And we started talking. I told I had gone to the mosque and so forth. And in the 5-minute ride to where I was staying, we developed a little bit of a connection. He goes, "Well, I'm interested in your book." And I said, "No, I have a book upstairs. I'll go get it for you." And then he told me about how he just got married actually to a Catholic girl who is now converted to Islam. And we had this beautiful little exchange. I went and got the book, and I will tell you that he didn't convert me, I didn't convert him, and I can't tell you maybe that I love him, but I can tell you that in the 63 years, it was the first time I had hugged someone twice within 15 minutes of meeting them,
yeah.
and it was just because we open ourselves up to different experiences.
Mhm.
And I think that's just so, so important in our faith journey that we don't get so myopic. Now, again, I told you I'm Christian, so I've got very strict, the very strict Christian beliefs. And so I do have some Christian beliefs that um, are exclusionary. And I can't say, wait, I don't believe those exclusionary beliefs. No, I believe them. But what I don't know is how God is going to resolve all of that. And one of the things I'd like to, emphasize. So And one of the exclusionary Christian beliefs that only Christians are going to heaven. Well, gee, that's real easy for me. I was born in the United States, real easy for me to be Christian. So I kind of won the genetic lottery.
Yeah.
And for all those people who were born in Afghanistan in a remote countryside and their grandfather and great grandfathers were imams, and the only church house of worship they have in their city, their town, is a mosque. Oh, gee, God hates them, made them lose the genetic lottery, and they're gonna burn in the eternal fires of hell. It's that simple. Well, I don't believe it's that simple. I believe that God is a loving God and that He's going to make some sort of provision that's beyond, guess what? And it's gonna be beyond my understanding, just like a lot of things are. And so I allow myself that possibility. Now, I do believe Christ is the only way, and I believe Christ is going to have a provision, and part of that is a little bit my background on this, my spiritual journey.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, my mother's father was Jewish. Now, tragically, or maybe I should say, to my good fortune, he died when she was 3 weeks old. So, Irish Catholic grandmother, Russian Jewish father. That was a commotion back in the 30s. Um, and he died when she was 3 weeks old. So, my Irish Catholic grandmother raised her Catholic. But if he would have lived, she might have been a nice Jewish girl who married a nice Jewish boy,
Yeah.
and then I would have been a nice Jewish boy. And so, am I just lucky that my grandfather died? So I got, I won the genetic. I go, oh, thank God my grandmother took over, and then I got to be Catholic. And it's kind of some of the things are funny about my mom. So her maiden name, very Jewish, Cohen. And I was after she passed away, I was looking at her, her first communion certificate, and it's Marguerite Cohen is getting her first communion certificate at a Catholic church. So that must have been, wait, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Uh, but and that certainly that kind of background, I obviously have a lot of Jewish cousins, and that type of background has made me more receptive to other faiths.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now, the way that I read your chapter, though, on going to a synagogue, was that it seemed to be the least friendliest place that you went to based on the description. And, you know, that background that you just told me about made me think about that in terms of your comfort level, uh, based on some Jewish heritage that you've got. So, can you tell me about that experience a little bit?
Sure. And so, you're right. And I'm glad you're pointing that out because I don't want to say everything was so great and I was embraced and, hoisted on people's shoulders every time I walked in. So at the uh, temple, well, first of all, temple, just like Metch church worship, the temple worship, probably 10% of the seats were full.
Yeah.
That was it, maybe about 10%. And so, and unfortunately, I got a little bit lost and I was a little bit late. But the congregants didn't seem to interact with each other, much, and they didn't engage with me or interact with me, otherwise. So that's one place I had a very neutral experience in terms of engagement. Part of it is, God, there were so few people there to begin with.
Yeah.
And then I'll tell you another little funny experience. I went to the Russian Orthodox Church. And I walked in there, and that was one place that they didn't even make eye contact with me. I mean, it was like, I don't know if they thought I was KGB or CIA, but they did not have anything to do with me. It was really very, interesting. But hey, I was the one-time visitor. Maybe if I came back, there would be a little
Yeah.
bit thawing of the relationship. So I don't really hold it against people. Though I would say if I was advising churches is that, gee, these are people coming in, and especially if they come in the first time, I'm not gonna say they're lost, but, they're looking for something, and a little bit of engagement is always very helpful.
Yeah.
You can't go overboard because one of my cousin's girlfriends told me, "I went to a church and they were real nice to me. Something was wrong with them because they were nice to me." It was like, well, no, they were just yeah, I felt like maybe they were a cult and they were trying to get me, draw me in. So this is look, we have to reach people where they're at. We're not always gonna know where people are at, and you do the best you can being mindful that people are in all different places. So you're right. I'm glad you pointed that out. Not and that's why on a journey, if you I encourage people to go on a journey and guess what? Go to a lot of different places.
Yeah.
And because you may have to kiss a lot of toads before you find your prince.
So, in your acknowledgments, you acknowledge that unexpectedly your mother became a main character in this story, in this journey. So, would you
Yeah.
explain that comment?
Yeah. This is, and of course, when I started writing the book, I did not know she was going to be the main character or one of the main characters at the end of the book. So my mom, who said, "Wait, your soul is marked with the stain of Catholicism," her health was declining, her mobility was declining, and finally, I jokingly say I had to find a place to incarcerate her for the rest of her life. Well, it just so happened there was an assisted living facility across the street from my church. And so I told her, Mom, you can start going to, church again because she couldn't even get in and out of a car to go to church anymore. I had to find someplace literally not walking distance, but rolling distance.
Yeah.
So I was able to roll her on Sundays from the assisted living to my church. Well, she walks into my church the first few times. It's not her people, it's not her music, it's not her service. The sanctuary was very dark, dimly lit. I mean, she cried the first few times that she went to
Mhm.
church. Like, oh my gosh, this is what my life has now come to. I can't go to my church. This is so different and everything. People would come on up to her to greet her, and they were kind of like, oh no, she's crying. What do I do? I will tell you, though, within 5 weeks, she had a conversion that Billy Graham never accomplished. She'd hit the church doors, clapping her hands, singing, stomping her feet. They'd removed one chair on the aisle so I could put her wheelchair. She had a
Yeah.
third row, first chair, center section, was always reserved for my mom. After every church service, it was a scene out of The Godfather on the occasion of his daughter's wedding. No less than 20 people would mob her to hug her, to kiss her, and told the seniors group made sure she was included. The Christmas play, they engineered a special gown that she could put on while she was in her wheelchair, and they wheeled her up on the stage so she could be part of uh, part of the Christmas play. But really even more than that, and so the church embraced her. Well, I travel a lot, I like to travel. So there were 2 ladies who stepped up, and called called themselves, or I call them the guardians. And when I was out of town, they wheeled her back and forth to church every Sunday, and she'd be yelling at them, "They're going too fast," or whatever.
Yeah.
But they endured it all, and in a very loving fashion. They loved her and brought her back and forth. Well, 2024, I'm visiting my granddaughters in Chattanooga, and they bring her back from church and said she's not feeling well. Well, I'm like, "Hey, big deal. She's an old lady. She's fine." Well, about 6 hours later, the assisted living facility says, "We're not asking for permission. She's going to the hospital." Well, so I text the guardians, and one of them, Shupon, rushes to the hospital, almost beats my nephew, he's the other branch of the family. In her hand is the bag with the pajamas and the slippers. And she never leaves my mom's side and held her hand until she died 6 a.m. the next morning. As I was frantically struggling to come back into town, she was with her every single moment, the last hours of her life. And
Wow.
that's the power of community. Wait, I gotta tell you another story about the power community that's really related. 5 years earlier, you know what my pastor did? Something very hokey that you can't believe. He says, "Everybody stand up, you tell the person next to you that you love them." Oh my gosh, I don't know this person. It's a woman. I can't tell another woman that I love them. I don't know them. So literally, I lied between my teeth and told the lady next to her, I love Lex next to me that I love her. Well, this woman walks up to me and she tells me she loves me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what? I think she's crazy enough to believe that she actually loves me. She sounded like she's telling me the truth. And I just filed that away. Well, 5 years later, I'm rushing back to the hospital. They kept my mom and they said, "Oh, we'll keep her in the room till you get here." And the guardian said, "Hey, what time are you gonna get to the hospital?" I said, 12:30. I show up at the hospital at 12:30, and who is it? The other guardian is standing at the hospital door. The woman who 5 years told me earlier, she told me she loved me, she was there so that this mama's boy facing the first day of his life without his mother would not do it alone. She was with me as I walked in to see my mother, my deceased mother. And so it was true. She does love me. And that's the power of community. And that's the power of church. And that's when you find the right place.
Yeah.
And so that's how my mom got to be a major part of this story. And that's what makes I want to encourage people to seize the benefit of community worship. And again, because it propels your spiritual journey. So I realize, I'm departing from talking about my personal spiritual journey, but your spiritual journey can't help but accelerate when
Right.
you're in that type of environment.
Yeah. Yeah, you did something terrible, which was make me tear up on my own podcast. So,
My mom's story has that impact on people, and
yeah.
and what and the impact on me. I mean, that it's just so profound. Um, that and again, talk about bedfellows. The old white lady going to this church with an all black congregation, being totally embraced. And you could almost, to my mom, you could have said that was a different religion from being Catholic, but all
Yeah.
that didn't matter. Love prevailed. And, um, and obviously I miss my mom. I'm glad that her example, can be a powerful piece of this book and an encouragement an encouragement to people.
Well, I appreciate that you noted that in the acknowledgments, uh, because
Yeah.
that was important.
Oh, it
Well,
most certainly.
my wife and I are the directors of our greeters ministry,
Oh, great.
uh, and there's a lot in your book that relates to that, obviously, uh, and I'm going to recommend it to our greeters. Uh, but I think uh, I guess one of the things is there are people who walk into a church who want to sit in the back and be left alone because they're there to grieve. They're there for some personal situation that's affecting them. Uh, and I have run into the case where those people, when you want to get over friendly with them, they want you to keep your distance because
Yeah.
they're there for not for community. They're there for another purpose. But they are few and far between. And I think the way that your book speaks to community, is just very important.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you for saying that, and I do agree, we have to reach people where they're at, and some people don't want, and then we have to be astute enough as greeters, to kind of recognize that, and maybe it's just, "Thank you for being here. We're available to for you. We're available to you, rather, and, if you need something, know that you can call upon us." And maybe that's
yeah,
all it is. But one of the things that I'm not necessarily I'm on the first time visitors, let's say, committee, if you will. But after church, hey, we want you to meet first time visitors, come meet with us. And I go into that room and meet with the people. And most times, um, I just say, look, we're real happy that you're here with us today. I think today was representative of the kind of church body we are, the message that we give. Or if it wasn't, if there was something special going on that day, I'll say, look, this was a little bit of a departure. But
yeah,
really, at the end of the day, I just say, we want to invite you back and we'd love for you to give us another chance. Now, some people, and that's all I try to accomplish, give us another chance on a first time visitor. Now, some people want to come in and say, wait, I want to know that you strictly adhere to the Bible and every week you're quoting from the Bible and you're strictly biblically based and there's none of this new age nonsense. So some people will come out and say that the very first time
yeah,
they so it's all types of of the spectrum. But there's great opportunities. So you talked about grieving. I'll tell you an example. So I went into a non-denominational Christian church that the entire congregation was South Asian Indian from India or of Indian descent. And it just so happened a friend of mine had passed away that week, 50 years old. Very unfortunate. And so the pastor came to meet me afterwards, and I actually offered it to the pastor. I said, Pastor, it's been a difficult week. This friend of mine just died. And he said, look, obviously he expressed his condolences. And he says, can we just take a moment to pray together? And that was beautiful and it was very uplifting for me. And it was exactly the tonic I needed at that moment. So that's what I needed and wanted and was receptive to. You pointed out some people are going to say, look, I want to be alone with my thoughts and not do it. And we just have to realize people will be at all different spectrums. But I'm glad your church has a greeter, a greeting committee, and yeah, just you have to react to people where they're at to the extent that you can figure that out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think one of the things, if I could add about church, and so many times people will say, "Look, I've been wounded." Richard, that's great. Uh, my church when I was younger, a bunch of thieves, and then guess what? There's pastors that have had sex with underage children in churches, and guess what, Richard? You're a Catholic. You know what those priests did with little boys. All of that is true, and all of that has caused tremendous wounding. I grieve all of that, and all of it is wrong, and I reject all of that. Um, and it's not so simple to say, well, they weren't acting within the faith. Obviously, those were unfaithful acts. The real key is that do you say, I'm never going to church again because of them, and deny yourself the benefits of church? And some people will. And look, there's some wounding that just going to church won't cure. There's therapy and things that are needed. I'm very involved in children's advocacy for abused children, so there's some things that you're not just going to cure by going to church. But what I would say is ask people to look at it and tell you that the right place can be so beneficial, just like the right relationship can be so beneficial. Many of us have been in relationships where a partner cheated on us and betrayed us tremendously. And that does wound us and scar us and make it difficult to say, I ever want to go into another relationship. But most people find themselves to say, wait, I know being in a loving, committed relationship can be very beneficial. So I'm going to work to overcome um, this wounding so I can engage in a healthy relationship. And so that's kind of the perspective I would ask people to think about. Would you get over a wounding in another type of relationship, a betrayal? And yes, many people can find themselves a way to get past that. And I would encourage people to do the same because there's a world of benefit to community worship.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, as always happens on this show, we have reached
Oh,
the end of our time. Uh, and when we get to this point, I always give the guests an opportunity to leave the audience with a few words of wisdom. Uh, I feel that you've almost already done that for us, uh, but I want to give you the official opportunity to leave this particular audience with whatever words you'd like to leave them with. So this is that chance.
well, the first thing is gratitude to you for allowing me to come on, and gratitude for the listeners who have come on and received this message. And I think ultimately what I would say is that we are born for community and we function best when we're within community. And it extends to whatever other function you have in your life. If you're a runner, you'll become a better runner if you start running with a community. If you're on a spiritual journey, you will become better. You will be accelerated if you're in community with other people. And I would submit to you that churches can provide wonderful communities for you to help propel you and realizing the whole scope of things that have occurred in the past and woundings. I would encourage people to go out and search. And I would guarantee that if they commit to a search, they will discover that indeed there is a place for everyone and everyone needs a place.
And with that, audience, as always, take what you've heard, incorporate it into your life that which resonates with you, and put the rest on a shelf until you're ready to deal with it. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.